Transform your startup journey with the Energy Tech Nexus. Connect with fellow founders, access critical resources, and be part of a community shaping the future of energy and carbon tech. Your path to building a Thunder Lizard starts here. Learn more at energytechnexus.com.
Well, welcome to the show. Today we are in the studio with Hermann, who is the co-founder of Alma Energy. And Alma Energy focuses on the clean energy on clean energy through direct lithium extraction. So I'm really excited to get into that. So tell us a little bit about this technology and what you plan on doing with Alma Energy.
Yeah, okay. So thank you very much for having me here. And so what we are doing is basically we deliver critical minerals to the global energy transition. So we see we are in a technology transition now. We are going away from the fossil fuel driven energy system into something different. Whatever it will be certainly something exciting and new. It's simply the way how progress works. So we deliver the critical minerals, and on that we produce green lithium. And important here is we try to deliver it at a high rate of return. Okay, so because the economic aspect is very important to drive the energy transition. Without the economy driver, you do not get a transition. So that's very important for us. What we do with our technologies, we avoid a couple of things which makes it very environmental green. So we avoid freshwater production. And freshwater usage, and we do not need any chemicals for our technology. And on top of it, the technology has a very small footprint, so no excessive land use.
Yeah, no, so talk to us a little bit about that, how the traditional way of extracting lithium and how bad that is for the environment and why we need a better way.
So yeah, of course, we're talking about direct lithium extraction. There's no traditional way. So there's some technologies are more advanced, I have to say. None of these technologies have actually entered the full production stage. Okay, so they are on testing, on pilots, and there are basically three lithium extraction technologies. One is ion exchange. The other one is a sorbent technology, and then an absorption kind of system.
So how do people get lithium for batteries today for like Tesla?
They got it usually out of the refining. So ion exchange is usually let's say that is a traditional way that is basically used over in the chili production. And here comes the advantage of our technology. We do not have actually the demand for fresh water in the production. So these technologies I mentioned before, they all need fresh water just to flush out the lithium, because they have usually some kind of a process stage where they bind the lithium, but then you have to liberate it to make it accessible as a product. So it needs fresh water, and it needs a lot of chemicals. So our technology is basically based on electrodialysis, and that uses selective membranes. And these membranes are basically, the whole process is basically not using any chemicals or fresh water. We just use the brine as it comes out of the ground or wherever it comes from. Our technology can be used to recycle batteries, because what they do nowadays, they leach out the chemicals, the components, and then they have to extract them. So the technology is basically useful at the classical production or liquid mining, how we call it, or recycling existing batteries.
Yes, and you're a geoscientist,
yes,
right? Like your background. So tell us a little bit about how is lithium actually present in nature?
Okay, that's a good question, and it touches a little bit our exploration, let's say, concept and secret. But lithium comes out of what you call the pegmatitic suite of rocks. So you have to have somehow a connectivity to the basement. And this is where the lithium is actually concentrated. And then it makes it by circulation of waters, hydrothermal waters, into certain reservoirs. And that's very important, where we combine lithium extraction with geothermal, because that water circulates through the subsurface and it heats up and it takes in lithium. So you get a brine basically at the end of the day, which is hot and rich in critical minerals.
And so fundamentally, lithium is trapped in a salt, right? Is that
not
what
necessary?
It is? So what is brine if it's not salt? So I just assumed it was salt water.
Okay.
Yeah.
So brine is basically what we call out of the oil and gas industry is basically a saline liquid. That's usually what the drillers call it when they drilled for oil because there's a lot of water. And by the way, I want to tell you this little unknown secret or very well-known secret. The oil and gas industry was primarily a water-producing industry. So we always handled a lot of water. And we call it wastewater or wastewater brine. And so, but there is in this trash is a certain treasure because there's heat in it and there is lithium in it. So, and we want to harvest that. So that's very important. This is where we come in historically or from our background. We have that knowledge out of the oil and gas industry. We know how to drill these things. We know how to handle large quantities of fluid we have to bring out of the ground. And we can turn that, what the old industry said, with the trash, we can turn into a treasure.
Like, what's the ratio of, what do they call it? I know there's gas to oil ratio, but I guess there's a water to oil ratio.
Correct.
What is that typically?
We call it water cut.
Water cut, yeah.
Okay, the water cut, I talked to somebody in Nevada and has an oil well, and the water cut was 99.3%.
So that's doing very rough math. For every barrel of oil, there's 99 barrels of oil, of water, right?
Water, yeah.
So that's the ratio.
Or you could say more than 99 barrels of water you have at the end of the day, and you have less than a barrel of oil.
It's the little skim on the top.
Yeah.
And that water is actually brine. Is that what you're talking about? Yeah.
So, and usually the ratio, I can give you an example from the unconventional production, which is a big thing today in the Permian Basin, in the Appalachian Basin, the Marcellus, and so forth. The average water cut for a mature well is between 65 and 85%. So that water needs to go somewhere. And here's the thing, if we can extract lithium from it, we can actually add a value to the wastewater. Handling wastewater or produced water in the oil and gas industry is a cost factor. So I worked in certain areas and we looked at economic models, and we had areas where the water handling was up to a premium of $15 to $20 a barrel.
To handle the produced water. Okay.
Yeah. So you see, when we can extract, and this is the important thing I forgot to mention, our technology actually desalinates the water. So we take not only the lithium out, which is a precious part we can sell and bring to the market, and this market has a huge growth potential, but we can also desalinate the water. That means for whoever produces something out there, you do not have to re-inject that water in the ground. So you could use it for irrigation.
So it's a gray water kind of quality.
Exactly.
Got it.
So, and you could actually, at the end of the day, maybe you find a city and said, okay, we want to purify it more, and we put the investment in it to do that. Fine. But for us, it's basically at the moment we can offer desalinated water. I wouldn't drink it.
I was thinking, like, just as a sidebar, like there's a lot of discussion today about PFAS and how it's in drinking water. I'm like, well, this stuff's been locked in the ground. It's probably PFAS free. If you really want, there's a bottled water company concept in here.
That's for sure. Yeah, the PFAS is another aspect. So the water is definitively has no anthropogenic contamination on it. It has, however, it's loaded with a lot of stuff of chemistry. And this, what we do is with this concept, we filter it out. Okay. So we end up with a lot of lithium, and we have a base case scenario where we end up with about 36,000 barrels of fresh desalinated water a day when we put in through 100,000 barrels. It's a huge number, but be aware when you are in the oil and gas industry, these numbers are just normal.
Yep. Yeah.
Okay.
And for the layman at home, so a barrel is also already like whatever it is, 42 gallons. So like this is like you multiply 50 on top of these numbers, and it's like, there's a lot of volume, but that's where the opportunity comes from, right?
So I'm from Europe, so I'm a metric guy, but I learned the hard way what a barrel is and things like that. So the point is that you can make not only, and this is another aspect of the technology I forgot to mention, in order to precipitate all these cations out, let's take calcium, magnesium, you have to get them somewhere out of the brine, and we precipitate them as a carbonate. Okay, so that is basically a limestone, and when you have a calcium magnesium mixture, you get a dolomite, which is actually a good raw material. But the key here is we need CO2.
Yeah, so it's a way to lock carbon.
So we are really 100% million-year sequester, guaranteed sequester of CO2.
So CO2 to crystallize the...
Yes. You basically precipitate a carbonate out of it. It's a little bit the same when you live in some areas, not in Houston, but when you have your cooking pot or your kettle or your tea, and it gets this nice little
at
crust.
At the bottom, right.
That is your carbonate. Okay. So, and when you go up, let's say up in the Appalachians or in the hill country, all these nice hills are made out of limestone. And they're there for millions of years. So I can sequester CO2 with that technology permanently.
So yeah, you're going to basically, for lack of a better term, grow rocks. And then the idea is that by itself, it might be a dolomite that wouldn't have a derivative use, but it could be put in a pit in the ground or something like that.
Yes,
okay.
yes. Or you could use it as building material if you want. But these are all these revenue streams which are secondary or tertiary in the system. And what we learned is we have to focus on one thing.
That makes the money. Yeah.
Yes. And because when you look at it from the prospect of an investor, they want to see the revenue stream. Okay. And if I add all these things in every little aspect, let's say dolomite, it is an additional revenue, fine. However, it's also a risk element. Yep. So, and it's always about risk and reward. So what we do is basically we calculated out what our technology brings on benefits. So what we have is we can sequester between 16 and 84 tons of CO2 per day. In return, we get between 3 and 4.5 tons of lithium carbonate equivalent out, which is actually what we built our economic model on it.
Is that pegged to a certain size well, or that be more like a processing a certain amount of
water? That's a certain amount of water. And there's another good question, actually, because it really depends on the chemistry. So the bandwidths I showed you, told you between 3 and 4.5 tons of lithium is really depending on what water quality or brine chemistry we actually get into the process. So the efficiency of your process depends very much on it, and actually the economics of it. All right. So coming back to the initial question, what kind of traditional extraction technologies are out there? Some of them have really big challenges because when they have not the right brine chemistry, they have to put so much preconditioning up front on their brine before they run it through their technology that renders the whole process uneconomic.
Yeah.
Okay, so your solution's actually more economic.
Correct.
Because it's robust and its ability to take in a lot of different inputs. Yeah.
So it's a fairly robust technology because we just bring the brine in, and be aware it's basically based on desalination technology. All the membranes we use are off the shelf. So all the hardware which goes into the technology is already developed. It's out there. So we do not have to do that. And we're coming out of the desalination industry. So we have a lot of experience of our engineers have a lot of experience on desalination in the Middle East. And most of our colleagues, we work together, are sitting in West Texas. It's pretty hot over there, and the Rio Grande is not a big river. So they need a lot of desalinated water or fresh water for their population. So we are talking about the I-10 corridor. I-25 corridor, El Paso, Las Cruces area. So, but the key here is that the technology provides these lithium carbonate, and the economic model we have built on it looks that we have a rate of return of north of 25%. And that's a very good rate.
I'd take that deal.
Yeah, exactly. And so from our point of view, of course, it's an early stage, but we think this is an economic viable solution. And as I said before, we need to know very carefully what kind of water chemistry we can actually run through. Of course, there is certain brine chemistry which is not capable to do that. So you want to avoid that pitfall that you build a great technology and then you have, but what kind of brine do I have actually? And then I run in that bottleneck. So what we do at the same time, and this is what I said earlier on, we're looking in oil and gas fields because there are two reasons for it. The first, more than two reasons actually, but one of the main reasons is we do have access to water very easily. We know what they pump out of the ground. We can analyze it and see if it's compatible with our technology. The second thing, what's always important when it comes to projects is the risk versus reward. I told you the reward, it's north of 25%. It's a good number. The risk is, however, the other important issue. So you have to balance that out. So when I go into oil and gas fields, I minimize my risk. Okay, I do not have to drill wells. There are a lot of wells around. I have a lot of understanding already of the subsurface. So this is not a prospect. It's not an exploration exercise. We have already an asset.
Okay. It's a low risk.
It's already been exploited. It's already been studied. Yeah.
Correct.
They already have core samples.
And low risk transfers usually in low capex and in a higher chance of success of your project. So you can do that. Of course, you have to spend money. There's no question on it because you have to build technology, particularly on the surface. Our technology we built in a modular system. So you need different modules, and each module fits on an 18-wheeler, on a tractor trailer. So when you build it, depending on the capacity you are looking at, you just put a battery of these guys out there.
Okay, so then it's mobile, so you can kind of take it wherever.
Correct.
And I guess your goal is then to do it while production is happening, because that way you get access to the water.
Yes. We could also deploy it to a recycling plant, battery recycling plant, you see? So you are highly mobile, and it depends on the capacity of the operations over there, how much water they have or brine they have to treat. Then we just built the battery out.
Got it. Yeah. And so for those of you who are kind of familiar with or not familiar with the oil field, like there's an oil field, oil pump level, and maybe at a pad they'll have whatever it is, 6 to 8 pumps. But usually they have these batteries that fill up with water, and then they have a truck take it away to a central processing or disposal well. So I assume you would either set up a separate battery or separate destination, or would it be potentially at the disposal site? Yeah, it could be anywhere in between, but it's not necessarily like one system per well because of the way they set up.
No. You build, of course. So what these guys usually do in the operation, the oil and gas fields, you see there are certain tanks next to the oil field. There are usually 3. When you drive out there, you see 3 tanks. One is for the oil, one is for the water, because they have a little very physical separator on site. And I think the middle tank is for overflow, either oil or thing, or what they couldn't separate. So they have these 3 grates. And what you can do is and what they do usually nowadays, they gather the water. Okay, when you drive in certain areas, you see these black plastic pipes lying on the ground, and that's basic to gather the water.
Because there's so much volume, because it's so much more water.
And here's the thing. So in most states, the regulation says what comes out of the ground has to go back into the ground. So they gather the water, and then they hand the water over to a water handling company, and they press the water down into subsurface. That's a really delicate point. You heard we had a very strong earthquake out in Texas. the causality between water handling and earthquake trigger is not proven. But as an earth scientist who starts his career in the United States as a Southern California earthquake center, I have my thoughts about it.
Okay.
I mean, you're putting a lot of volume down.
Yeah.
It's got to go somewhere.
Yeah,
So-
exactly.
So and this is another important thing. If I do not have to re-inject all the produced water, that is a big upside for the oil producers or whoever is out there. And take it, obviously, so we don't switch off oil and gas production tomorrow. We cannot do that, okay? So we will have oil and gas or hydrocarbon production fading out slowly, but it's time to address the problem you have with it. And the more we minimize the problem and the negative outcome, the better for everybody. And if you can make it more financially attractive for these guys, and they do everything as long as there is a financial attractiveness and an upside in it. That's the principle where we live in.
Yeah.
That's the whole thing.
So tell us a little bit about like what phase of your company you're in right now with these projects. You were just talking to us before about you took a trip over the summer.
Mm-hmm.
Tell us about where you went and what you found out, and what are you going to do next?
So what we found out, we found a couple of assets we are very interested in. I cannot tell you here where and what it is, but it's very attractive. We look at it, and I don't know if I mentioned it, but we try to combine this lithium extraction also with heat extraction. The reason is very simple. We started as a geothermal company, and we learned very quickly that risk and reward game. Well, we know it from our career anyway, but we know that it's very hard to make geothermal an attractive economic business. So we added this lithium to it in order to make it attractive, and I gave you the number, north of 25%. It looks very good. So, but we have still these geothermal on our soul, on our heart, and we try to combine both. So we have areas where we are looking for hot wells, and that's particularly, and it's clear to everybody who work in this area, it's not a secret. You look for areas where you have a gas lag, because natural gas, thermogenic gas, is hot. You crack oil. And so these are good places. So we looked around in these areas where we have gas. We run into a lot of opportunities. What we also saw is important is sequestration of CO2. Because a lot of these operators have a lot of CO2 on their hands, and they do not know what to do with it. They usually let it bubble out in the atmosphere, but the regulatory environment changes. Okay, we know we have the problem with methane leaking out of gas wells. But there's also a lot of CO2. So this CO2 has to be handled. And as I said before, our technology is capable in that process to take in the CO2 and sequester it. So it's a win-win situation. And we are looking basically in these traditional oil and gas fields simply as a starting point, because we want to reduce the risk. As we discussed before, we need to have a de-risked environment, and because it just drives the capex down.
So suddenly you have a geothermal where you can generate power,
Mm-hmm.
and then you have a way to clean the water, but I
Yes.
assume it takes power to kind of run those systems.
Correct.
And
yeah.
and then also to
Yeah.
capture the CO2.
So the important thing is what we do with the electrodialysis. There's the word electro in it. So when you go in desalination, they drive it by pressure, which is also requires energy. That's called reverse osmosis, but the driver is basically a pressure difference. Here, what we do is we drive it by electrodes. So we apply, it's like a battery, just the inverse. We apply an electric field, which allows us to drive these cations, which are dissolved in the brine, through these stack of membranes. And so we filter sequentially out different, it goes in the water chemistry a little bit, bivalent and monovalent systems. There is a little bit of challenge I have to mention. And so what we end up is a lot of sodium, because brine has a high salinity. And then you have a little bit of lithium.
Yeah, it's almost like that water cut problem.
So exactly. Yeah. No, but this is in the process basically. So we end up, and the concentration difference can be 3-4 magnitudes. Okay, so we have to bring down the sodium level in order to effectively extract the lithium. And so we are talking to a lot of companies and a lot of research labs at the moment to help us to bring, this is the last thing what we are working.
Yeah. So who
that.
wants sodium other than Morton salt? Like, what would you do with it?
What we do is we make salt out of it, because we have, before it started as salt, so the electrolysis process splits it in chlorine, and so we recombine it with sodium, so we end up with pretty nice salt. So but that's, we could also do other chemical products out of it. It's basically a question on the fantasy and the innovation capability of our chemical engineers. And then we can look if there is a market for it. So it could be sodium hydroxide or something like that, which you could bring out to the market. So what we do with the electrodialysis, we take that brine with all its parts in it. And in the process, we have the capability to split it in each different element which is in it. I didn't touch other things. So lithium is our low-hanging fruit. Yeah. So when we dream about it, because we do not do that at the moment, but we're working on it, we are looking in other critical minerals. There's a lot of these things in that brine. So it comes with a lot of chemistry, and we have to see what kind of technology we can deploy at the end of the day. Rare earth elements. So the biggest problem are the heavy part of the rare earth element suite. So these
hard because there's not a lot of supply, or hard to separate?
No, it's not hard to. Separation is a technology, more is a demand at the moment.
Okay.
So because these are the elements which are used in the semiconductor industry, in the chip industry, and as you know, there is a strategic monopoly on the supply chain. And there's a lot of desire to break that quasi-monopoly and make the market a little bit more open. So if we could offer a production on that side, that would be interesting. But at the moment, we are focusing on a low-hanging fruit at the first thing. We think lithium has a huge future. So we have these lithium-ion batteries. But now you may heard about all these news about these solid-state batteries. Samsung just wants to bring something to the market. There are others that they do that. And the funny thing is, you need even, I think, more lithium as for the lithium-ion battery, because the solid-state is made out of a lithium metal anode.
Yep.
Okay,
Yep.
So the demand will go up. The other thing is also that the quantity on the market will go up, simply because everybody holds back on an EV vehicle, me as well, because why I should do a lithium-ion battery, which is basically I have to replace after 8 years or something like that. I don't know the real number. So solid state has a completely different expectation. And I think when these solid state batteries come to the market, it will give a huge boost to the electrification of the mobility sector. And lithium is the material which is number 3 in the chemical periodic table. It has the highest weight to charge ratio. So it's light. And if you need, everything which moves has a weight issue. And so when you have very, very, very dense energy storage capability, it's the best thing.
Are you ready to lead the decarbonization charge? Energy Tech Nexus is your platform for growth, offering unique resources and expertise for energy and carbon tech founders. Join us at energytechnexus.com and start building your Thunder Lizard. Yeah, no, I was, because you mentioned there's some things that you still need to kind of tweak on the lab and figure out, the sodium levels and how you could decrease those so you could extract it a lot easier. But how ready are you to actually do a pilot in the field.
Yeah. So we work parallel. So we try to solve that problem now. That's where we are standing at. And what we do in parallel, we look for the right site. As I mentioned before, this summer trip, for instance, one of these things. And important here is it's not the lithium concentration you are talking about. We are talking about the overall chemical composition of the brine. So we take samples and then we analyze. And we invite everybody out there who has water samples from wells, from springs, whatever they have, to talk to us, because we analyze them in a complete water analysis. So we have a lab on hand which is capable to actually detect in a very, qualified way the trace elements, because these concentrations are very little. And so we do that at the moment. So we work in parallel. What is the chemistry, and is it digestible or compatible with our technology?
Yeah. So finding the right concentration of brine in different parts of
but the concentration
world.
Is not.
Not the concentration.
The right mix, right?
The right.
Yeah.
Yeah, the right chemical composition.
Chemical composition.
Yeah,
okay.
That's very key in order, because you need. It's not only the lithium. It's the same like when you cook something. You have all the ingredients have to be right to make a great dish, and this is the same thing. So you have to have the right ingredients. So you need some spices just spoil it, so, and other spices are really very desired, and so that's basically how we're looking at it, and so we do that in parallel. And at the moment, we are doing the sampling campaign. We have an event with smaller operators here in Texas next month, in September, where we try to raise awareness with these guys. Hey, give us your produced water. We can see if there's an upside for it. Okay, because that's very important.
And they're usually measuring this anyways, right? Or do you have to send it to a new lab to get more precise?
You need a very, very good lab. So we tested a couple of labs, and I can tell you, you know what you do. You do all these nasty things. So you give blind samples and things like that. And some stuff came back. It was all over the place, the numbers. He said, hey, wait a moment. Okay, it can happen. And because trace element measurements is not very easy.
Because it's such a small percentage of it.
Correct. Yeah. And then they have other chemical elements which make it even harder to separate and measure them. And so only a few labs can do that very good. So you have to figure that out. In general, in the past, and that's another thing why we see lithium as a huge running room, there are databases and measurements which are dating back 20 years or even longer. At that time, we didn't have the analytical capabilities to measure correctly the concentration. Okay, you can say, oh yeah, that's not good, but it can be also an advantage. Okay, so we have now the analytical lab capabilities have increased so much. Okay, so mass spectrometers are basically standard instruments. When I was a PhD many years back, it was a monstrous machine, and oh God, we had so many of them, but it was a huge operation. Now the thing is really a box. It has the size of a fridge.
Yeah. Oh, I've seen one that's microwave sized, which is amazing to me.
Yeah. So they are really very, very, very. So and the resolution is there. So that's very important. And the rest is how you prep your samples. It's good how good your lab guys.
So you have a team now. You're working on this. How are you funding it, and how do you kind of plan to fund it going forward?
So we are looking, of course. When it comes to a pilot, we are fully aware that then we have to we have to, what you call in the old days, we have to cut steel. And when you cut steel, that costs you. And so we have a plan. So we think a pilot will be somewhere below 10 million. It's more for the surface facilities because you scale up. We try to do a pilot on an existing well. We do not want to do a demonstration on a drill and own well. As I said before, it has risk and it needs a lot of CapEx. So if we can avoid that, we reduce our pilot costs or balance sheet. So we just offload that. So this is why we are looking in oil and gas fields, okay? Because this stuff is existing there. The other thing is permitting, to be honest with you. This is a headache. When you go in an oil and gas area, all the permits are there. The people are used to it. You do not have any kind of NIMBY or whatever kind of problems on it, because it is something, it's more welcomed over there. I said, hey, maybe it's something great. Oh, it's green, perfect. We'll love it anyway. So you run more through open doors than in other areas, okay? So it has a lot of positive aspects, but the key is here that we just offload the risk and the costs on the capex on the subsurface side. And that's not, and then later on, when you upscale to larger quantities, then that it's a little bit a different story. But the next goal is to establish a pilot at a place where the water chemistry works, so, and things like that.
So to recap, so you've looked at a couple of different, you've analyzed and said there's a couple of different locations to go. You visited a couple of different sites. You're doing a call to try and get samples. And so you're not quite at the point where you have like an LOI or a commitment for a specific location, but that's something in the next 3 to 6 months.
So we have, at the moment, we are in the process of negotiating some assets.
Good.
So we have 2 assets. Well, you know how negotiations work. You never know where you're standing, and it's always a back and forth until it's signed. But we have, I think we are very confident to have 2 assets on our fingertips. Number 3, and the question is if we really, what the quality is. And then we have another asset where we work heavily on it, and that's basically the key thing. So we have basically 4 opportunities. On the technology development, we are looking to, we work a lot with academic people, okay? And academia is great. But they are slow. So what we are looking at is we want to accelerate the technology development. So we are talking to the labs here in the US. So DOE has a couple of labs to, and they use, Elysium is for them, and critical minerals became a focus area. And so we are talking to them. I just was yesterday on a call with a guy from a national lab. They work actually on exactly what we are doing. So we agreed already that we have a strong alignment. And then we are looking, of course, for startup guys here in Houston. And this is why we like Houston. But we hate the heat here. I guess.
What made you come to Houston in the first place?
Oh, that was basically it's basically the industry. I worked in the oil and gas industry. So you came here to work in the oil and gas industry. Yeah. Basically, Katrina blew me out of New Orleans, and this is where I started working with Shell here in Houston, and then made my career through the oil industry. I have seen a lot of projects because one of my things in the industry was, of course, exploration, but also business development. What is actually makes sense, where we can make, and this is where the focus was always, what is your rate of return? And I have seen, and I know what numbers entices the investor. Okay. So, and you need to know how much money you have to get in, what's your rate of return when you have your money back. You need these cash flow curve, things like that, in order to get these people enticed on it. So, and we did that, and we know also where and at which point you have to price in the technology risk. Okay. So at a certain point, the technology risk is actually covered. And I think in our case, once we have the pilot done and we know what comes out of it, that technology is basically in stone, or whatever happened to it. But this is basically what we are looking for. Our aim is to bring it to a pilot stage, because then we demonstrate basically the capability of the technology and how we can actually implement it. And then the rest is big investment at the end of the day, I would say.
And so, like, for the first pilot, like, who's the target investor? Because it's not is it venture dollars? Is it project finance? Is it a blend? Like, who do you think is that targeted investor?
So we have priorities, of course.
Yeah.
The best life is you have non-dilutive funding.
Yep.
This is just heaven. The second thing is corporate investors. Simply because usually these guys speak your language. They pull in the same direction. So you look more for partnership. And then the last thing is then big capital investment. That goes from funds to banks, whatever you call loans, whatever is out there. That we would love to have that when after past the pilot, or in the stage where the pilot you want to upscale the pilot and make it more attractive or things like that.
So for the pilot, you're anticipating like the equity investor will come from an industry partner.
Yeah.
And I would assume just where this sits, it's not necessarily the super majors. It's going to be a medium producer.
Correct.
Who does have this as a strategic challenge, and they'd put it in and off the balance sheet.
Yes.
And so,
so we observe one of the mid-size operators here in the oil and gas industry, and they tried also their technology. We know where they're standing, and they need to pivot on their technology development. And so we see something like that as a potential partner, where we can say, hey, let's try our technology, let's try our concept, and can you help us? And be honest, when you are a startup, your resources are very limited, not only financially, but also on brain power. And so you need interesting, good people, and we come out of this industry, and it is usually a large resource industry financially, and also on human resources. So they have less problems on that end. So we would like to tap into that when it comes then, because when you do the technology, okay, or you drill wells or you complete wells, they have engineers. This is their bread and butter business. They know that. And so it makes no sense to reinvent the wheel here.
Oh, like you can use their project engineering on the feed if they're partnered.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And the experience, it's really, I drilled a couple of wells in my life, and my partner, Natalia, she drilled even more onshore. And on what kind of people you have to rely. Best practice is so important. I followed a lot of wells on the geothermal side in Europe. This is not industry based. And they completely over budget, over time, and make so many mistakes, which translates in over budget and over time.
In underperforming returns.
Exactly. And sorry, this is why I told you need a big truck to impress the guys out there. But you want to talk to these people. There is a guy, whatever, in the middle of Texas, and, on his chewing tobacco, and no, that's not God.
Yeah.
So, but it. He knows what he's talking about.
Yep.
So best practice and experience is very key here. So when you combine that with these guys, because drilling wells is not an easy thing. I can show you a little photograph from a place where they drilled a well. It was a runaway well. So they drilled it in 1974. And the Christmas trees, these are all these valves you have on the well. It's all there, and some pipes sticking out. And water is gushing since 1974.
So they haven't been able to seal it because it didn't have a blowout.
Yeah. So they just took the equipment and run.
Yeah.
And it's what we call a runaway well. So things can go very quickly, very bad. So I worked on things in Asia, Southeast Asia, and there was a small operator. They didn't know what they were doing. And it was about a mud diapir that drilled into a overpressured mud. And they couldn't retrieve anything, and there's a village next. And I saw a picture 3 months later, and all what you saw was a plane, and the tower of the minaret was sticking out of the mud.
They made a new lake.
Yeah.
Oh, are you serious?
Yeah.
And
Wow.
there's just a lot of experience.
Correct.
Right, that people have.
Yes, you do not want to go into this business, subsurface business without experience. Greenhorns it's very dangerous. And these kind of guys have this know-how, the best practice they know, and you want to rely on these people. And that's key.
When you think about like working with these partners, like what do they want in return? Like they want the IRR, but are they just concerned about the one project, or is there something else that they're usually looking for when you're talking to them?
Yeah. So it depends when you get some, let's say a corporate partner on board, you can play then all these aspects we talked about, sequestration. So some of these guys, we have one company, very big company, and they have a CO2 problem. Not here in Houston, but somewhere else. And they use it because they produce something else which makes a lot of money for them. But they have so what you do with your CO2, okay? And you see our regulatory environment has changed. When you can handle it, you get some incentives, tax incentives. Sorry, or when you do not handle it correctly, you get penalized. Okay, so these guys are in that situation. So we are a CO2 off-taker.
Yeah, you can solve that problem.
It could be the reason why these guys may want a project in that neighborhood, because you do not want to pipe the CO2 across the country. They have a pipeline system which goes a couple of 100 miles, believe it or not, just to move around the CO2. But we can put something in that neighborhood, and maybe the deal maker is not the lithium.
Yep.
Maybe it is the CO2. You do not know what the situation is at the end of the day. And I think they have that CO2 problem because they came by accident to a nice material commodity, which they can sell to the market. And this is why they run it. It's not oil, it's not gas. So you see, you have to have this flexibility to adapt to what is a local situation. Okay. And that's what we try to do here, to evaluate which is a good place, learn more about what is a good place where we can do it. And as I said, our dream is to combine geothermal with Elysium extraction, because we can on-site produce the energy we need to run our electrodialysis from the heat. So it's basically we maximize the return on that wastewater.
You were touching on this a little bit earlier. How has it been the journey to then kind of go from, working with Shell, working with these big companies, to then now saying, you know what, we're going to start our own company and do our own project?
So it's quite interesting because we did geothermal in the oil industry. So our first project I came across geothermal was we evaluated scenarios for production in Southeast Asia. That was not with Shell, it was with Marathon Oil, which is gone now because they got bought by ConocoPhillips recently. And we looked at it, and these islands had fumaroles and geysers and things. I said, hey, there is a lot of heat around. Can we use can we harvest the power and produce electricity? Because when you do operations, you need a lot of electricity. You run pumps and all sorts of things. And that's all driven by electricity, sometimes gas. But so that was my first project. And then you talk to the oil engineers, and at that time said, nah, let's put a diesel generator in.
Yep.
But then I came across the EGS study from MIT in 2005, 2006. And then they showed what the energy potential is in the country. It was a very high level study. And it was about how many exajoule. I said, what on earth is an exajoule? So we went into that, and I looked at it and said, there's a huge potential. And I talk to drillers all the time because we work together, and actually in the company, be honest with you, the drillers had always the best food on the floor. But anyway, so we talked to the drillers, and I know that they had a lot of hot wells. So they drill and said, oh my God, I'm before target, but I reach a temperature. And there's a magic number in the industry, it's 400 degrees Fahrenheit. Because all the instruments, when you drill a well, you have to record, there's instruments for wireline logs. They are all certified to 400 degree. So when I go deeper than 400 degree, for what reason I cannot ever collect data.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And so even if you can't reach target depth, you just might be done.
You stop.
Yeah.
So the limit was that, because the boss said, otherwise we have to pay for the broken instruments, and the service provider writes us a huge bill on that. So we don't want to do that. So 400 was always the limit. So in the driller I always said, 394. Just to be safe.
To make sure.
And so you see that, and we had a lot of hot wells, particularly here in the south, and you abandon them.
If they're too hot, because you don't even hit the source rock.
No.
Right. So
the
reservoir, you just gotta abandon it.
Mm-hmm. It's part of the business. And so you say, okay, let's go somewhere else. But important here is that we have a lot of hot wells. Okay, even if I don't reach my hottest target, but I get a good idea where I have my temperature, and here comes in AI and machine learning and all these things, where you extrapolate in a nice way to figure out where is your hotspot, where is your sweet spot, what kind of formation is it, which has the right reservoir performance to retrieve that temperature. And the same applies for the chemistry. Okay, so you use these data, also they are not perfect. No data is perfect, but you need a very good strategy to optimize your assessment and where you go for. That's basic classical exploration, and you can apply the same workflows. I gave a talk on that on OTC in Houston. This is the Ocean Technology Conference. I mean, we are onshore. I don't know why I did it at an offshore conference, but this is what it is. They invited me for that. And anyway, so the point is really that you use these existing technologies and the knowledge and the best practice and the work and the experience of these people and transform it to a new strategy and a new concept. That's all what you do. Pretty simple. And it's a huge future for them, because on the end of the day, we have a lot of over-mature oil and gas fields. So the last count I had from the 90s, we had over 2 million holes in the United States. So the country has more holes than a Swiss cheese. Okay, there are millions of wells out there. And sooner or later, in every field, every oil production one day expires or exhausts. It over-matures. And then what do people do? So with the geothermal and the lithium, at least in certain areas, we can give these people a future. That's a very important aspect for us, what drives us.
And what has helped you in like the startup ecosystem, the innovation ecosystem in Houston, in really driving these projects forward?
I think the important thing is that you get in Houston, important is you get a network, you need to get a community and a welcoming community. So you guys are a welcoming community and help us. Because the problem is when you are a little startup, you know, we are running the thing, basically 2 people manage the whole thing. You cannot do that. Okay, you cannot. We are doing, it's incredible what you do. You know, you do fundraising, you do management, you do bookkeeping, you do technology, you do exploration. You have to do everything. So you exhaust very quickly. And I can tell you there is sometimes a lot of exhaust in the system and mentally. And it's, So you need this kind of environment which supports you. Okay, and it's very important for us to have that. Otherwise, you cannot live, you cannot survive. And networking is also very important. So it's so great, you know. So we love it. These events you guys have, you just hang out there and you run in people and say, hey, wait a moment, this is interesting. Can you do this and could do that for me? So I remember at one of our lunch meetings, I met this guy with a drilling technology. What's his name?
He's got the cool edge bits.
Yeah. This was great. So I talked to his dad who developed this new technology. And I think this is amazing because, and then it spins further because I have another contact. They try to do really ultra deep hot dry rock. And these guys tell me I can drill at higher temperatures because I do efficient cooling of the drill bit. I said, hey, wait a moment, this is great. You can go into temperature ranges where conventional drill bits already fail. So even if I can push the whole 3,000-4,000 feet deeper, that's a game.
That's huge. Yeah.
So all that came out of this discussion.
That's amazing.
So this is
that's
spin.
what we want. Yeah.
And you need that spin. And Houston, why Houston? Houston has this oil and energy industry. So, well, for some people, it's the Antichrist. I understand that. It's my daughter is one of them.
So you have to understand that.
Yeah. They said, you want to work with me in the oil? Nope. They have ethical concerns. Okay, good. But what I want to say is there's these huge synergies out there. As I said before, experience, technology, knowledge. We speak the same language. We can go. We can head in the same direction, and this is very key. And this is why and the very important thing for me is the only industry which has actually a very well developed risk culture is the oil and gas industry. So so when you're sitting here in Houston, and I give you we drove around in the country. We looked at a lot of pump checks, and each pump check has a nameplate on it. That's the API number, and and then there's a telephone number. In emergency case, please call. Yep. And the phone number the area code is either 713 or 832.
Yeah. It's someone here who's got to pick it up and figure it out.
You go across the country. Everybody who operates that stuff out there is located in Houston. So this is the key. It's the epicenter for new technology.
Yeah. So I'm looking at the time. So where can people learn more about the company, your projects, and how can they get in touch with you? Oh,
the easiest way is we have a website, www.almaenergy.net.
Not
Sorry, the .com was taken. So .net, almaenergy.net. And there we have, the easiest way is we have a contact there. And otherwise they can contact me. Should I give my email address?
Well, we can share your LinkedIn, and if you want, we'll share your email in the show notes.
LinkedIn account.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's the best way. Or just meet us and come in to your
Energy Tech Nexus.
Yes,
yeah,
exactly. The Energy Tech Nexus, and just talk to us. This is the best place to communicate, and that's what we do.
Cool.
Thank you.
Thank you.